Some of the strongest people you know are survivors of wars you never saw. They didn't win trophies, they didn't get standing ovations, but they survived battles that would have broken most. Battles that never left visible scars. Welcome, chosen ones. Today, we're not here to sugarcoat the journey. We're here to speak to the ones who smile in public but cry in silence. To the ones who've had to rebuild themselves in the dark. To the ones whose strength was forged in isolation, betrayal, spiritual attacks, and generational curses they didn't ask for, but broke anyway. If you've ever wondered why your path has been heavier, why your journey felt more intense, why you were fighting things others didn't even notice, this message is for you, because you didn't just survive heartbreaks or disappointments. You survived identity theft on a soul level. You survived people who were supposed to love you but were secretly assigned to keep you stuck. You survived spiritual warfare disguised as ordinary life. And no one clapped for you because they didn't even know you were at war. But you're still here, still rising, still reclaiming your voice, your purpose, your peace. And soon, you're about to shock them. Not because of what you gained, but because of what you outlived. So get ready, we're diving deep. Beyond the cliches, beyond the fake positivity, into the real, raw truth of what you endured and why it makes you more powerful than you even realize. Make sure you subscribe if this message speaks to your soul. And if you've ever survived something in silence, drop a $9.99 in the comments. This is a community of survivors and your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Let's go. The hidden battle. Let's be honest. Some of your hardest battles were never witnessed by a single soul. No audience, no support group, no emotional safety net. Just you, your thoughts, and a storm that refused to let up. The truth is, a lot of what you survived didn't even have a name. There were no neat labels to wrap around your pain. How do you explain the heaviness that starts before you even open your eyes in the morning? How do you describe the invisible war zones you walked through? In your family, your mind, your spirit, while still functioning like everything was fine. That's the hidden battle. And chosen ones, you've been fighting it for years. You showed up to school, to work, to relationships, wearing armor made of smiles and silence. And people assumed you were okay because you didn't fall apart in front of them. But deep down, you knew. You were unraveling. Not because you were weak, but because everything around you was engineered to break something inside you. This is the part most people will never understand. What attacked you wasn't just a bad person or a rough season. It was an entire system, spiritual, emotional, even generational, that was designed to stop you from becoming who you were born to be. And it wasn't loud. It didn't come in with flashing lights. It was subtle, strategic, silent, a slow erosion of your confidence, a quiet attack on your worth. A whisper that repeated, "You're not enough," until you started to believe it. You weren't just dealing with trauma. You were dealing with programming. Patterns passed down like family heirlooms. Rules that said, don't talk about it, keep the peace, stay small, be who they expect you to be. But something in you resisted. Even when you didn't have the language for it, you knew. You knew the silence wasn't normal. You knew the way you were being treated wasn't love. You knew that pretending to be okay was slowly killing you. And yet, you endured. There's a reason the people around you didn't see the full picture. You didn't wear your suffering on your sleeve. You learned to bleed internally, to cry in the shower, to scream in your car, to whisper prayers into your pillow, not even sure if anyone was listening. But someone was. Heaven never ignored your pain. Even when it felt like God was silent, he was still moving behind the scenes because, chosen ones, your battles have always had purpose, even the silent ones. You were never meant to look like what you were going through. Your light was never supposed to go out, even when the darkness tried to consume you. And your survival, it's not just a fluke, it's a sign of the calling on your life, because only those with great purpose endure great pressure. And let's talk about that pressure. It wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. There were times you couldn't even explain why you were so tired, so anxious, so emotionally raw. You weren't lazy, you were fighting invisible resistance. You weren't broken, you were being attacked for your potential. The irony is, while others mocked you, overlooked you, or dismissed you, you were surviving tests they wouldn't last a week in. The kind of tests that don't leave bruises, but leave you questioning your own sanity. There were moments you sat in silence, wondering, am I the problem? Is this all in my head? But deep down, something in you refused to collapse. That's the mark of a chosen one. You don't always understand what's happening to you while it's happening. But afterward, you realize you were being forged, refined, built for something greater than the pain you endured. And here's the wild part. The same people who ignored your struggle, the ones who said you're too sensitive, the ones who kept telling you to just move on, they're the ones who will be most shocked when you rise, because they didn't see the battle. They didn't see the spiritual wounds. They don't know the nights you negotiated with life, with God, with yourself. They just see your glow now, the peace you walk in, the strength you carry, and it confuses them. But make no mistake, you earned every inch of it. You didn't skip steps, you survived them. You didn't bypass the pain, you pushed through it. You didn't perform strength, you became it. And now that the storm is clearing, you're seeing the truth. The hidden battles weren't just about breaking you. They were about breaking what was never meant to stay. The fear, the lies, the generational strongholds. You didn't just survive trauma. You survived what trauma was sent to stop, your transformation. So don't be surprised when people act like your growth came out of nowhere. They weren't there in the dark when you were building silently. They didn't hear the prayers. They didn't feel the war. But now they'll see the result, and it's going to shock them. Because chosen one, you are not what you went through, you are what you overcame. You threatened the system. Let's make something clear right now. You weren't attacked just because of who you are. You were attacked because of what you carry. Your presence disrupted something deep, something ancient, something that was designed to survive, as long as no one challenged it. See, most people think the betrayal, rejection, or isolation you went through was just about bad relationships or toxic people. But those people, they were never the root, they were the fruit, symptoms of a system that felt threatened the moment you started to awaken. You were born into structures, family systems, spiritual lineages, generational patterns that had been operating on autopilot for decades, maybe even centuries. Silent rules, unspoken agreements, ways of thinking, behaving, believing that no one dared to question until you did. And when you did, everything started shaking. Chosen one, you were never just the black sheep of the family. You were the breaker of cycles, the one sent to disrupt dysfunction, to challenge the emotional neglect, the abuse that was excused as normal, the traditions rooted in fear, pride, and shame. You didn't just come to survive. You came to uproot things, and that's why the attack on your life was never random. From the very beginning, your energy was different. You may not have had the words for it, but people felt it. Even as a child, you were the one who asked too many questions, who felt too deeply, who didn't quite fit the mold, and that made you dangerous. Not because you were trying to rebel, but because you saw through the illusion. You saw the emotional abandonment no one wanted to admit. You noticed the manipulation behind the smiles. You picked up on the secrets that were never spoken but always present. And when you started acting differently, thinking differently, reacting differently, that's when the system activated against you. People lashed out, not because you harmed them, but because your growth made their comfort zones feel like prisons. Your healing made their numbness too obvious. Your boundaries exposed their lack of self-control. Your light made their shadows more visible. You were never trying to shame anyone, but your evolution forced people to look at what they hadn't dealt with. And not everybody is ready for that. So instead of celebrating your growth, they resented it. Instead of asking how you did it, they labeled you as arrogant, distant, or too much. But again, it was never about you. It was about the fact that your light disturbed the order and the system, whether it's family dysfunction, cultural norms, or spiritual bondage. Doesn't like being disturbed. It survives on silence. It survives on patterns that stay unchecked. It survives on everyone playing their assigned role. But you refuse to play yours. You refuse to carry the bitterness that wasn't yours. You refuse to pass down the same emotional poverty. You refuse to pretend that brokenness was normal, just so others could feel safe. And that made you a threat. That's why you were isolated. Why the rejection was so sharp. Why even the people who claimed to love you couldn't hide their discomfort when you started becoming who you truly are. Because here's the thing. You weren't just stepping into your identity. You were unraveling theirs. And let's not forget the spiritual layer. The moment you started remembering who you are, the moment you stopped shrinking, stopped begging for love, stopped living for validation, that's when spiritual resistance kicked in. Because your awakening wasn't just about you. It was going to ripple through bloodlines. It was going to disrupt the flow of dysfunction that had gone unchallenged for generations. You weren't just healing. You were reversing curses. You were changing the atmosphere. You were tearing down strongholds with your very existence. And the enemy doesn't like that. So yes, the attacks felt personal. The betrayals stung. The loneliness cut deep. But you have to see it for what it was. Confirmation. Confirmation that your light was effective. That your voice was powerful. That your very presence in that family, that environment, that system was strategic. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to break through. And the reason some people feared you without ever saying it out loud is because deep down they recognized something divine in you. Even if they couldn't articulate it, even if they called it something else, even if they tried to mock, reject, or silence it, they knew. Their spirit knew. And sometimes that knowing stirred up fear. Because your life exposed theirs. Your refusal to tolerate chaos made their dysfunction feel uncomfortable. Your boundaries made their manipulation ineffective. Your peace made their drama irrelevant. And instead of rising with you, they fought you. But guess what? You survived it. You rose anyway. You kept growing, healing, loving, without needing anyone's permission. You didn't become bitter, you became wise. You didn't seek revenge, you sought freedom. You didn't collapse under the pressure. You became a force through it. And now, chosen one, the system that tried to break you, can no longer hold you. Because you've outgrown it. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, you're not the same. And those who feared your potential, they're about to witness the full version of what they tried to suppress. So don't dim your light. Don't explain your healing. Don't apologize for disrupting dysfunction. You were born to do exactly that. And now that the system has been exposed, you're walking in a freedom most people can't even fathom. And that's why you're about to shock them. Betrayed by proximity. Not everyone who walked with you was walking for you. And not every betrayal came from enemies. Some of the deepest wounds came from people who once sat beside you, smiled at your table, prayed with you, laughed with you, then turned without warning. It's one thing to be betrayed by a stranger. It's another to be betrayed by someone who once knew your secrets. But let's get this clear. You were not betrayed because you were doing something wrong. You were betrayed because you were becoming right. You see, something powerful happens when a chosen one begins to heal. When you start unlearning dysfunction. When you start setting boundaries that protect your peace. When you stop over-explaining your worth. It sends a shockwave through every relationship that was based on your brokenness. And for some people, that's uncomfortable. Not because they hate you, but because they depended on the version of you that stayed. They got used to your silence, your people-pleasing, your self-sacrifice. You being broken made them feel strong. You being unsure made them feel in control. You being available 24/7 gave them comfort, even if it was draining you. But when you started to grow, to evolve, to speak up, that's when everything shifted. At first, it was subtle. Less eye contact, shorter replies. You could feel the energy shift in the room, even when no one said a word. Then came the passive-aggressive remarks, the jokes that weren't really jokes, the sarcasm laced with bitterness, and finally the silence, ghosted, distance, the unfollow, the slow fade that hurt more than a clean break ever could. And you sat there wondering, What did I do wrong? You reread conversations, you replayed moments in your head trying to locate the offense. But the truth is, your only mistake was healing. You started choosing yourself and it made them feel abandoned. You stopped tolerating nonsense and it made them feel exposed. You stopped dimming your light and suddenly they said you were too much. But here's the truth. You were outgrowing environments before you even realized it. Your soul was stretching. Your mind was awakening. Your spirit was rejecting what used to feel normal. And that growth, it doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with betrayal. Because growth confronts, it disrupts, it challenges everything around it to also evolve. And not everyone is willing. Some would rather sabotage your progress than face their own stagnation. They'll call you selfish for setting boundaries, cold for protecting your peace, fake for no longer showing up the way they were used to. But don't be fooled. Their distance isn't punishment, it's a reveal. They're not falling back because you changed for the worse. They're falling back because they can't reach you where you've risen. And you're not being dramatic for noticing it. You're not overthinking when you feel that shift. That's spiritual discernment. That's your spirit recognizing that some connections are seasonal, and the season has changed. But let's acknowledge this, it still hurts. It hurts when people you thought would be lifelong start pulling away. It hurts when you realize someone you loved was only loyal to your weakness. It hurts when the same people who watched you suffer in silence are now uncomfortable watching you smile in freedom. But chosen one, that pain is sacred because it teaches you who's really in your corner and who was only there for the version of you that didn't know your worth. And here's something else you may not have realized yet. Many of them didn't betray you out of hate. They betrayed you because your growth activated something in them they didn't want to confront. Your healing made them feel exposed. Your peace made them aware of their chaos. Your refusal to tolerate what once drained you made them question their own choices. And instead of rising with you, they walked away. But that's not your burden to carry. You were never responsible for managing their comfort. You were never assigned to keep playing a version of yourself that kept others from facing their shadows. You were sent to rise, and sometimes that means rising alone. You see, proximity creates the illusion of loyalty. Just because they were close doesn't mean they were for you. Just because they clapped once doesn't mean they were cheering for your healing. And sometimes betrayal is the clearest confirmation of alignment. Because when your spirit elevates, anything not in agreement with your purpose will start to fall away. Let it fall. Don't chase what God is removing. Don't cling to what your soul is releasing. And don't let someone's betrayal rewrite the truth of who you are becoming. Because they didn't walk away because you're hard to love. They walked away because the old version of you they were comfortable with no longer exists. You leveled up, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You became clear, focused, grounded. You stopped needing their approval, and that unsettled them. But your evolution is not up for negotiation. You didn't come this far to shrink again. You didn't heal this much to go back to explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Let them be confused. Let them make up their stories. Because while they're busy trying to process your transformation, you're building a life they never imagined you'd survive to see. And they will be shocked, not just by what you have, but by who you've become. So if you've felt the sting of betrayal lately, if people have fallen away just when you needed them most, if your circle has gotten smaller while your spirit has gotten stronger, know this: you're not being punished, you're being positioned. God is clearing space. Your next level requires it. And your healing, that's not the thing that pushed people away. That's the thing that's pulling you into alignment. Keep growing, keep rising. Let the loss make room for legacy. Because what's coming next was never meant to be shared with those who were only loyal to your pain. Survival without applause. Here's a truth that hits different when you've lived it. Some of your greatest victories happened in absolute silence. No one saw you win that battle in your mind. No one knew you got out of bed when everything in you said stay down. No one applauded the moment you decided, I'm not giving up today. See, the world loves to celebrate visible strength, It praises the comeback stories with neat endings and polished photos. But what it overlooks are the silent survivors, the ones who fought wars no one knew were happening, the ones who kept showing up, not because they were strong, but because they had no other choice. Chosen one, you know exactly what that feels like. You were bleeding internally while others complimented your outfit. You were drowning in anxiety while still returning texts with emojis and exclamation marks. You were functioning while falling apart. And the irony? The more pain you endured in silence, the more people assumed you were fine. Because you were high functioning, because you were responsible, because you always looked okay. They saw your productivity, not your pain. They saw your loyalty, not your loneliness. They saw your schedule, not your scars. But don't let that fool you. Your silent survival wasn't invisible to heaven. God saw every single moment, the sleepless nights, the whispered prayers, the days you held yourself together with sheer will and divine grace. You weren't just enduring, you were evolving. You were being forged in the dark, built in silence, refined when no one was clapping. And it's that kind of strength, the unseen, uncelebrated, unshakable strength, that makes you a different kind of force. Because what most people don't realize is this: you weren't just trying to make it through a hard season. You were trying to keep your soul intact in a world designed to crush it. This wasn't about bills or breakups. This was about identity. This was about emotional survival. This was about spiritual preservation. There were days when it wasn't about winning. It was about not losing yourself. And you didn't. Even when you questioned everything. Even when you cried until your chest ached. Even when your own reflection felt like a stranger, you held on. That's a different kind of strength. That's not the kind you post about. It's not the kind that gets awards. But it's the kind that builds legacies. Because the person you're becoming, they were born in the fire of everything you endured alone. And here's the thing most people never consider. The lack of applause wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Had people seen what you were truly fighting, they would have tried to help you into places you weren't yet ready for. They would have rushed your healing, misunderstood your process, projected their fears onto your growth. But heaven kept you hidden, not because you weren't worthy, but because what you were carrying was too sacred to be handled by unready hands. You were incubating, developing, becoming, and now, after all the internal battles, after all the moments where quitting looked like mercy, you've emerged with a kind of resilience that can't be taught, only earned. So if no one told you this lately, let me say it plainly. You did good. You've come so far, and your survival matters, even if they never understand the nights you cried in silence. Even if they never know how hard it was to believe in yourself again. Even if they minimize your struggle and joke about your pain. You know, God knows, and the fruit of your survival? It's showing now. It's in your peace, your boundaries, your joy that's not dependent on applause. Your glow that confuses people who didn't think you'd still be standing. And don't be surprised when some of them start rewriting the story. They'll pretend they supported you the whole time. They'll act like it wasn't that bad. They'll water it down, not because they're evil, but because they don't want to face the truth. They weren't there. They didn't ask. They didn't check in. And now your healing reminds them of what they ignored. But that's not your responsibility. You don't need to explain. You don't need to share your trauma receipts. You don't need to prove how deep the darkness was. Because your existence is the proof. You being here, sane, steady, still believing in love and light, is the miracle. You don't look like what you've been through. But don't let that fool anyone. The strength it took to carry your pain in silence, that was divine. So if you're still navigating the residue of a silent season, let me affirm you. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not weak. You are becoming whole, in ways most people won't understand, at a pace most people can't match, in a silence most people couldn't survive. You are a living, breathing reminder that the most powerful transformations happen without an audience. And now, your life will speak for itself. Your peace will be the loudest testimony. Your joy will confuse the enemy. And the best part, you didn't need anyone to clap for you. because heaven already did. Generational chains you broke. Let's talk about what no one saw, but what heaven celebrated. You didn't just survive your own pain, you survived the weight of generations. You carried things that didn't start with you, and still had the courage to say, "It ends with me." Chosen one, this is what most people don't understand. Your trauma wasn't just personal, it was inherited. You weren't just battling your own struggles, you were born into a war already in progress. Some of the emotions you felt weren't even yours, that heaviness. It was ancestral. That fear of being seen, being loved, being free. It was passed down like old furniture, scratched, dysfunctional, and never questioned. But while others accepted it as tradition, you looked around and said, "No more." And in doing so, you became what your bloodline had never seen before. A breaker of patterns, a disruptor of dysfunction, a rebel to spiritual bondage, and it came with a cost. See, when you're the first to break chains, you're also the first to feel their full weight. You were expected to keep quiet, to play along, to accept this is just how it is. But something in you rejected that. You may not have had the language for it, but your spirit knew. This is not normal, and it is not love. You were not just resisting trauma. You were resisting a legacy of survival over wholeness. A generational cycle of emotional neglect, self-abandonment, unspoken pain. You were the one who asked the hard questions. You were the one who saw the pain everyone pretended wasn't there. You were the one who refused to pass it on, and that made you dangerous to the system. Because generational cycles thrive on silence. They rely on everyone playing their part. Keep quiet, pretend you're fine, don't talk about that, smile in public, cry in private. But you broke that script. You started asking why love felt like fear, why family felt like control, why success felt like exhaustion. And when you couldn't find healthy answers, you started writing your own. That's when everything shifted. And let's be honest, it didn't make you popular. You were misunderstood, mocked, labeled as too sensitive, too emotional, or even rebellious. But none of those things were true. You were just awake. You could feel what others had numbed themselves to. You noticed what generations before you had learned to ignore. And for that, you were treated like the problem, when really, you were the solution. It's not easy being the first to wake up, to see the dysfunction that's been disguised as family loyalty, to feel love and fear mixed in the same space, to crave healing in a place where survival was the only priority. But you didn't let that stop you. Even when it hurt, even when you cried alone, even when you wanted to just go back and play the role like everyone else, something inside you kept rising. And that, chosen one, is generational courage. You weren't just healing your story, you were rewriting the story for everyone after you. Because here's what most people miss. When you break a pattern, you don't just heal yourself. You give permission to others to heal too. You shift the trajectory of generations. You set new standards. You create a new emotional language. The people who came before you may never understand it. They may never validate your healing or celebrate your freedom. But heaven saw it all. Every time you set a boundary that had never existed in your family. Every time you chose honesty over silence. Every time you forgave, not to let them off the hook, but to free yourself. Heaven took note, because you weren't just surviving anymore. You were freeing bloodlines. You were the one your ancestors prayed for, even if they didn't know how to ask. And here's what's wild. Your life may never look traditional. You might not have the white picket fence, the picture-perfect family, or the neatly tied ending. But you have something far more valuable. You have peace, you have awareness, you have the ability to choose something different. You have the power to stop cycles that would have continued unchecked. And the truth is, that's legacy. Not titles, not possessions, but healed patterns, changed mindsets, a family culture that breathes safety, truth, and emotional honesty. And yes, it's hard. It's hard when your family doesn't understand you. It's hard when they misinterpret your boundaries as disrespect. It's hard when your silence is seen as distance and your peace is seen as pride. But it's worth it, because you're not doing this just for you. You're doing it for the children you haven't met, for the siblings who don't yet have the words, for the future that deserves something better than recycled pain. And listen, some people will never acknowledge the weight you carried. They'll never say thank you. They may even criticize you for changing. Let them. Your healing was never for their validation. It was for your freedom. And if they want to stay in the pattern, that's their choice. But you chose freedom. You chose light. You chose wholeness. And even if it feels lonely now, one day someone will look back at your story and say, because of them, I knew it was possible to heal. You didn't just survive for yourself. You survived to create new blueprints. And that's what makes your journey sacred. So if the path feels heavy right now, if you're wondering why it feels like you're always the one doing the inner work, facing the hard truths, carrying the emotional weight, remember you're not cursed, you're called. And what you're building, it's going to outlive you. Freedom runs in your bloodline now because you put it there. Emotional and spiritual death. Let's talk about something few are brave enough to admit. You didn't just survive pain. You survived the kind of internal death that most people don't come back from. We often talk about physical survival, the losses, the betrayals, the heartbreaks. But what about the slow, silent death of the soul, the erosion of hope, the exhaustion that wears away your will to even try again? Chosen one, what you went through wasn't just difficult. It was spiritually suffocating. It was emotionally lethal. And here's what made it even more dangerous. It didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Quiet, consistent waves that chipped away at your identity. Each disappointment, each rejection, each time you were abandoned, overlooked, or betrayed, it stole a little more breath from your spirit, until eventually you weren't even living anymore, just existing. You smiled, but it wasn't real. You worked, but it drained you. You spoke, but your voice felt disconnected from your soul. You were present in the room, but your spirit? It was miles away. That right there is spiritual death, and no one talks about it. No one prepares you for the moment when the fight in you goes silent. When faith feels like fiction. When you start to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're too broken to be restored. There were nights you went to bed not expecting to wake up changed, just hoping to wake up numb, because the pain was too loud. And silence. Silence started to feel safer than hope. You know how dangerous that place is? It's not the kind of pain that makes you scream. It's the kind that makes you disappear from the inside out. And the scariest part is, no one notices, because to everyone else, you're fine. You're high-functioning, responsible, holding it together. Meanwhile, you're spiritually flatlining. But here's the miracle. You didn't stay there. Something in you, even if it was tiny, even if it was nearly crushed, refused to die. Maybe it was a single verse. Maybe it was a song, a memory, a random moment of grace, but it sparked something. And from that spark, you began to crawl back. Not with force, not with confidence, but with surrender. You didn't bounce back. You rebuilt, piece by piece, tear by tear, prayer by prayer, until you could breathe again. That's the part they'll never fully understand. The comeback wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with Instagram posts or inspirational quotes. It came in whispers. In mornings you chose to get out of bed. In days where the only victory was still being here. And for that alone, you deserve honor. Because most people don't survive spiritual death. They check out. They numb. They settle. They bury themselves in fake peace and call it healing. But not you. You wrestled with God. You questioned everything. You cried until your voice went silent, and still you got up. That's not weakness, that's warrior strength. Because when your spirit is under attack, the fight isn't about proving anything to others. It's about keeping your soul alive. And you did. Let that sink in. You kept your soul alive, even when everything around you screamed, give up. Even when your own thoughts became weapons. Even when you forgot who you were and felt like no one would care if you disappeared. You still chose life, not the life everyone else sees. The real one. The life that exists deep inside. The one only God knows. The one that whispers, there's still more in you. Don't quit yet. And now, look at you. You're not just breathing. You're living, you're starting to dream again. You're finding beauty in the small things. You're rebuilding faith, not the kind you inherited, but the kind you fought for. And no one can take that from you. Not the ones who left, not the ones who laughed, not the ones who didn't check in when you were on the edge. Because what you've built now, it's sacred, it's personal, it's rooted in truth, not performance. You don't need to perform strength anymore. You are strength, because you faced the death of your spirit and didn't let it swallow you. And maybe you're still healing. Maybe there are days when the fog rolls back in, when the weight creeps back up. That's okay. Survival isn't a straight line. Healing isn't linear. There will be relapses, setbacks, and moments of deep fatigue. But hear this, you're not who you were in the valley. You've come too far. You've tasted too much truth. You've seen too much light. And even when you feel lost again, you now carry a compass inside, your resilience. You know what it's like to die on the inside and still rise. So now, there's nothing, and no one, that can convince you you're powerless again. They can try to replay old scripts, try to bring up your past, try to poke at the wounds that once bled freely, but they won't get the same reaction, because you've healed deeper than the pain. You've reclaimed your soul. You're no longer fighting to prove your worth. You know it. You're no longer begging to be seen. You see yourself. You're no longer asking for permission to exist. You're walking in divine authority. So yes, chosen one, you survived emotional and spiritual death. But more than that, you resurrected. And now, you're a walking miracle. A testimony in motion. A soul that lives, breathes, and shines because it chose to keep going when everything said stop. And that right there is what makes you unstoppable. Your comeback will shock them. You didn't just survive. You transformed, quietly, completely, without warning. And now, you're about to shock a lot of people. Not because of what you're flaunting. Not because of some big announcement or public revenge. But because your peace, your glow, your clarity is loud without making a sound. See, people remember the version of you who struggled to breathe under the weight of generational pain. They remember the one who always said yes, who dimmed their light, who second-guessed their worth to make others comfortable. That's the version they're still looking for. They're waiting for you to shrink again, waiting for you to fold, waiting for you to walk back in the room the same way you left. Uncertain, apologetic, quiet. But that version of you doesn't exist anymore. And that's why they're going to be stunned. Because for years, they didn't just underestimate you. They misunderstood you. They confused humility with weakness, kindness with gullibility, silence with insignificance. They had no idea that the one they were ignoring was the one being refined. While they were performing for the crowd, you were healing in solitude. While they were chasing applause, you were cultivating roots. You were learning how to move without being seen. How to grow without needing confirmation. How to stand tall with no one clapping. And now the shift is undeniable. You don't speak the same. You don't react the same. You don't shrink the same. Because your comeback isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about finally living in what's rightfully yours. And make no mistake, your comeback will be felt, not because you're trying to flex, but because healing has a frequency. And the people who once overlooked you, they'll feel it in the way you enter the room now, in the way your boundaries no longer bend, in the way your spirit no longer begs for crumbs. You used to crave their validation, now you're allergic to it because you understand this time. Your value isn't up for debate. Your destiny isn't a group project, and your identity, it's not negotiable. Here's the truth. Your success was never about being loud, it was about being authentic. And authenticity, when it's been earned in silence, has a power that performance never will. So don't be surprised when people from your past suddenly resurface. Curious, confused, maybe even resentful. Because they're going to wonder, how did they do it? How did someone we counted out rise like that? How did they go from barely holding on to walking like royalty? And they'll search for answers. They'll assume it was luck. They'll credit your connections, your job, your income, your looks. But what they'll never fully understand is what it cost you to be this whole. They won't see the nights you spent in tears writing prayers no one would ever read. They won't feel the internal war you had to fight just to believe in yourself again. They won't know the discipline it took to choose peace over chaos, to choose solitude over shallow company, to choose healing over hiding, because that's what made your comeback real. It wasn't built on clout, it was built on consecration. Every setback you endured didn't delay you, it developed you. Every season of silence didn't stifle you, it strengthened you. Every betrayal you experienced didn't break you, it birthed you. And now you walk differently. You walk with a quiet kind of confidence. One that doesn't need a spotlight, one that doesn't seek revenge, one that simply is. You no longer need people to believe in you because you believe in you. You no longer need the room to approve of you because you've already approved yourself. You no longer need their likes because heaven already gave you a yes. That's the comeback no one expected, because while they were watching for the loud success story, they missed the subtle resurrection. They didn't see the work you did in the dark. They didn't notice the boundaries you rebuilt, the inner child you comforted, the voice you reclaimed. They just see the results. And that's what's going to shock them, because you're not just doing better. You are better. You're not just healing, you're walking in wholeness. You're not just succeeding, you're glowing from within. And the best part, you didn't force it, you didn't rush it, you didn't fake it. You let God do the deep work. You let time, truth, and tears carry you through. And now, you're rising, not out of spite, but out of alignment. So let them talk, let them wonder, let them speculate. You don't owe them an explanation. Your evolution is its own testimony. And your life? It's the loudest sermon you'll ever preach. You don't have to prove a thing. Just keep showing up as the healed version of you. The version they never thought would make it, because you didn't just come back. You came back better. You came back whole. You came back untouchable. And the world's not ready for that. But you're not waiting for the world to catch up. You're already gone, chosen one. If you're still here, still breathing, still believing, let that sink in. You've survived things most people will never even know about. Not because you shared every detail, not because the world applauded your pain, but because God carried you through every silent battle. You didn't get here by accident. You didn't rise because it was easy. You rose because you refused to stay buried, because somewhere deep in your soul, even on your worst day, you said, there has to be more than this. And you were right. There is more. More peace, more healing, more alignment, more purpose. You're not done. You're just getting started. What they saw as a breakdown was really your spiritual initiation. What they mistook for weakness was quiet strength being refined. And what they thought would finish you actually freed you. Let them be shocked. Let them wonder how you're still standing, how you still have joy, how you still carry light after walking through so much darkness. The answer isn't something they'll find in your social media. It's not something you need to explain, because the truth is what you survived isn't for everyone to understand. It's sacred, it's yours. And when you're ready to share it, you will. On your own terms, in your own time. With people who know how to hold a story that holy. Until then, just keep living. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep walking in quiet power. Keep letting your peace speak louder than your pain ever did. Because your glow, that's not for show. It's the evidence of every war you won in silence. If this message resonated with your spirit, drop a $9.99 in the comments. Let us know you're rising too. Let someone else reading the comments know they're not alone. And if you haven't already, subscribe. This space was made for you. A sanctuary for survivors, for visionaries, for the called, the chosen, the misfits, the ones who were underestimated but never forgotten by God. We're building a community of strength, healing, and unapologetic purpose. And you belong here. Your story is still unfolding. Your comeback is still in motion. And your presence? It's a reminder that heaven still wins. So keep going, keep growing, keep shining. Because you didn't just make it through. You've become the proof that survival is just the beginning. And resurrection is real. See you in the next video. Comment 999 if you're walking into your next chapter. Stronger, freer, and more unstoppable than ever. And don't forget to subscribe, because what's coming next will shake the very systems that tried to silence you. we rise together. Until next time.